Hello, this is Dustin from DustinWongPhotos.com. To receive more tutorials like this one, subscribe to the mailing list using the link posted in the description. Alright, today's tutorial we are going to walk through Adobe Lightroom. Now I use Adobe Lightroom version 5 and it is a serious upgrade from version 4, so I highly recommend this version. I'm going to show you how to quickly get started using Lightroom to organize your files and start doing some powerful image editing. In the interest of time, I will not be covering certain file management scenarios, such as how to move and rename folders, how to remap missing folder locations, or how to go about using multiple catalogs. Look for those in my video, Advanced File Management in Adobe Lightroom. Instead, I will focus on showing you how to get your original images into Lightroom so you can begin to edit them at a high level. I will walk you through the Develop module in detail, showing you an example of how I would edit an image using Lightroom only. I have integrated more complex editing adjustments into my personal workflow that utilize Photoshop and a variety of plugins. However, spending time in Lightroom is a great place to get the basics of image editing down before moving on to more refined techniques. Jumping right into it, this is what it's going to look like if you just started Adobe Lightroom and have no files associated with it. So let's get some files in here. So I've gone ahead and created a file system that I think works very well for photo management. So I've created a folder here, and I've created two folders within that. This way you separate your original image files in one main folder, which I call photo processing, and your finished processed image files in another folder, which I call photo output. Photo processing I like to separate by year, and then within each folder you'll have a variety of your image files. I make sure to have them labeled by year, month, and day. This way they all are chronologically ordered and can easily be found later. I think it's also important to label with some sort of description so that you can remember in, let's say, a couple months, you know exactly which one that is. Let's take a look at the output folder. Here we have some folders here that we might want to create files for to put into other programs such as Photomatix, or create TIFF files to load into Photoshop. But the primary one here, I think for most of us, will be a web output folder. How do we get files into here? So we go over here, we're in Library, we go to Folders, we click the plus, we go Add Folder, we navigate to that folder, and we click Choose. So this is the Lightroom's importer, and it's going to show us all the files in that directory. And we have the option to include or not include the files in here, but I basically accept them all. And one thing here that you may want to do is add metadata as you import. You're able to do this for all the images that are coming in. First, you would need to set up a preset. So you click New. But to show, and then you can label it and set them. And I'm just going to show you what my preset does. So this copyright preset adds your information that will stay with the file in case it gets spread around and no one knows whose it is. I think this is a nice thing to have. So once you've gone in and created your own preset, you can add it here. So we're going to click Import. And we can see, this is how you read the metadata. So you can see the file name, where it is, and then here is what was added in that preset. You can see that, and then you can see the technical info here. So the first thing we want to do here is to determine which photos are worth editing. Obviously there's going to be some that just aren't interesting or not very good. So I like to do this in Develop. We're going to start here. And one thing about Lightroom is it's great filter system. And so we have the option to label each file with a flag, leave it unflagged or rejected. We also can choose to assign a star rating, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or a color label. And all of these are filterable through your search function, which is very easy to use, and I'll show that to you later. I like using the 5-star method, and I'm going to walk you through that process real quickly right now. So first I'm just going to do a first pass through my set of images, and I'm going to put a 1-star by hitting 1 on the keyboard to indicate that this photo is worth saving and not trashing. It has interest, it has potential, and at a very quick decision, I'm talking like a couple of seconds, you should know if it's worth saving or not. And don't worry, after a while of doing this process, you'll get faster at making decisions, which is a very important part of being a digital photographer. So here we go. So I'm gonna just quickly go through these. And notice how quickly I'm making these decisions. See, sometimes I have to go back. So now that I've done my first pass, I can use the search functions that I was mentioning, which are right here. Here's your filters. You can filter the flags or the stars. So I'm going to do greater than or equal to 1 star. So now I only see the 1 stars. Now I go through the same process and do a 2-star. So the criteria, the bar is raised a little bit, but you get the idea. So we're going to go through here. And basically you would do this until you got to your picks. So here's all my images, and you can see that I've applied the filter here, so we can do this. One more thing about the filter, the flag rating. Some people like to use the X, which is the reject. And then you can filter on the rejected files. And this is nice because you could right click and delete all your rejected ones, and that would be a very quick way to delete everything. But so something to keep in mind. So I've gone through here and you can see, well, I'll show you. So this was my 1-star pass. I start everything, at least these were 1s, and then 2s, and then 3s, and eventually I narrowed it down to these. So I shot bracketed here to make sure that I had the full dynamic range of light that was happening that morning. And it turns out that I didn't need all of them, and I'll show you why in a second, but here's the dark, the middle, and the high. I'm actually going to go ahead and edit this one for demo purposes. We're going to reset this because I actually did something else to this, but for Lightroom processes, we're going to do it a different way. So I'm going to reset this. So this is what I saw when I first selected this. It was unchanged. This is the raw data file. So the first thing in your develop mode here is on the left you have presets, which I'm not going to be going into today, but you can play around with those. I personally don't use presets very often because I like to create everything on the fly. The right side is where all your adjustment panels are. And there's a lot of things in here, we're going to go through it. So the first thing that I like to do is actually down here at the bottom under lens correction. So I'm going to select profile and I'm going to check enable profile corrections. And what this does is it automatically detects your camera and your lens, and it corrects the barrel distortion and the vignetting caused by that combination. And you can go ahead and undo this if you don't like it. But a lot of times it's very good. You can see the vignetting that was corrected. Double clicking resets it. The other thing that I like to do here is remove chromatic aberration. So I check that box. Now this photo doesn't really have chromatic aberration, which is uh, caused by a bright light behind something, and it tends to create colored pixels around the edges of things. And so if this horizon was really bright, you might have chromatic aberration around this rock surface. But I'll check it anyways because it can't hurt. So the next thing I do is I go up to the top here and I look at my histogram and I see these are my highlight warning or shadow warnings and my highlight warning arrows. And you can see that I have a shadow warning. So what this means is that data is being clipped, and you can see that down here that we're losing a little bit of information there. And as I slide the exposure bar, we can see the histogram, all the tonal values are shifting towards the right. And that shadow warning goes away because we have pulled the information out of the clipping range. Now, this is a very interesting about RAW files is that they're able to contain data that we can't actually see sometimes. By using software editors like Lightroom, we are able to bring that data back into the image and then manipulate it and show it and create that image that is not possible if you just took the shot and left it alone. So this is one of the great reasons to shoot in RAW, and if you don't, I highly recommend it because Lightroom treats a RAW file no differently than a uh, than a JPEG file, other than you get more functionality. So why not do it? One more thing about how Lightroom handles the file system is that all these adjustments that I can make here are non-destructive. And what that means is that the data that is contained in your image file does not get affected by any of the things that you change here on the right. Essentially, the adjustments that you make is a formula that is applied to the original data to create a new file. And in that way, it never changes the original pixel data of your original file. So this means that you don't have to worry about messing up or doing anything and then never being able to get back to your original. You can play all you want here and be free from that. So we're going to keep going here. So I'm going to bring this exposure up to get rid of clipping. You don't want clipping. We want to get the histogram so it's in between these. And that looks pretty good. So the highlights affect the brightest tonal values within the image. The shadows affect the darker tonal values, and the whites affect a larger section of the brighter tonals, and the blacks affect a larger section of the darker tonal values. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to pull more of this data away from the edge so that it's not in danger of being clipped. And the reason for that is as we move through here and make adjustments, we may introduce some clipping, which is undesirable. So that's where I want to start. I think that's a good place. The next thing I want to do is add contrast, and we're going to do that primarily through the tone curve here. Now there's two versions of the tone curve in Lightroom. They're accessed through this toggle button in the corner. This is the one that appears by default. There are 4 values here: the highlights, the lights, and the darks and the shadows. They represent, similar to the ones up here, sections of tonal values. You can see how that's a bigger grouping, the lights are a big grouping, the darks are a bigger grouping, and the shadows are an isolated section. So as I click on this and I drag up and down, I'm only affecting the darker parts of the image, and you can see that in the histogram. The lighter parts aren't being affected at all. So this allows you to specifically target a certain part of your image, and that's a very powerful tool. But I'm going to use the other tone curve. I like this one better. It's a little bit more freeform. It allows me to make more precise adjustments to accomplish what I'm trying to do. So I'm going to make a classic S curve here. And the S curve has its way of adding contrast to the scene. So I think that looks pretty good. Next we can go to clarity, and we can add, so positive clarity adds mid-tone contrast and some detail. So that looks good. We're going to add some vibrance. Vibrance increases the saturation of unsaturated pixels. So the very saturated pixels don't get changed as much as pixels that aren't as saturated. So vibrance is a very good tool to play with because it can create a more balanced color look in your image. Whereas the saturation tool affects all pixels evenly and can quickly get out of control. So with this one, I would urge subtleness, and you don't want to get too much with that. I think that looks good for now. So around here, so this is the white balance slider, and this has the ability to change the color in your scene. And this is the benefit of shooting in RAW, is that you have a ton of flexibility here. So the warmer tones are achieved by brightening or raising the temperature of the white balance, and a cooling effect would be to lower it. Now, I particularly like a more cooler tone here, something like that. You know, sometimes you're making big changes to this, sometimes the camera gets it spot on. It's really up to you. If you want to make finer adjustments, you can click on this and use the arrow key. And sometimes I like to do that. The tint slider shifts things between green and magenta. Now this tends to be a fairly dramatic change, so I don't like to do too much with this. Very small adjustments I think are in order with this one. Something like that. I think that's a little too... I'll leave it there. Okay, so to continue with color, we're going to go down to here, your HSL, which is your hue, saturation, and luminance panel. Saturation is the main one that I use here. And you're able to pick any color range here and increase or decrease saturation. So you can see the effect of this. It's very isolated to certain parts of the image. There's a better way to do that though. You can use this tool, which is a sampler, and you can click on your image in the area that you want to change, and it will detect the color. And I'm going to slide up on the mouse now. Sliding up increases and sliding down decreases. And notice how it's moving some orange and red. So there's a ratio there that it detected, and it can do something that you can't really do on your own. So I really like using this. I want some more greens. Probably a little bit there. The Luminance panel selects the color ranges, but affects the brightness of those pixels. And so if we use the picker, sometimes you can use this to change the brightness of the sky. We'll see if we can do that here. Doesn't look too good, so I'm not gonna do that. But you can see the overall effect of this slider is that it's changing them. It's only affecting the blues here. But I'm not going to use it here. The hue adjustment allows you to shift color, and generally this is not the best thing to do. So you won't use this. You won't be using this too often, but if you need to, you can shift that color. So you want it a little bit more yellow or a little bit deeper orange. You could do that. Might even do that. And see how it would change these. See, that's affecting that. So I generally leave that alone. We're gonna deal with this sky that's pretty bright and on the verge of being blown out in a different way. All of these adjustments here are global adjustments, and they affect every part of the image. Lightroom has two tools here that we can use to isolate certain sections and do local adjustments. The first tool is the gradient tool. Click and you drag. And the gradient tool allows you to make any of these adjustments to this particular gradient. So I'm going to show you what that does. So the first place that you click will be the full effect will be on that side. The part that you drag and release will be zero effect. And so it'll create a smooth gradient between that, and then it will continue that value up. Likewise, if I make it really bright, it'll do that. So sometimes you want to make a little short transition zone from no effect to full effect all the way through, and that's how you would do that. For this one, we're going to position this so that we can darken the sky, but not much else. I'm gonna get rid of that. I think that looks pretty good. You have a lot of options here. You can change the color temperature of certain areas, and you can add all of these back in. And I'm going to add some here. I brighten this corner here. And one of the things about gradients that I love in Lightroom is that you can just play around with them and change them and see how they look and stretch it. It's very user friendly and allows you to experiment with different things so that you can get the effect that you want. Something like that. You can go back to the other ones and make changes if you want. I might add one more here. Sometimes there's a residual adjustment left over. I actually want that adjustment, so I'm gonna put that in here. The way that you get rid of that is, see how it starts here, is to zero it first and then click one, and then subsequent ones will always start off 0. The other way to make local adjustments is the magic brush tool, which is here. It has a size and it has a feather, and the feather is 0 to a full represents the amount of gradual change that this brush is going to paint. So a hard brush is going to have a hard edge, and you would do this if you wanted to trace the outline of something straight like that. In general though, you want some feather so that you can blend things more seamlessly. So we're going to add a little bit of saturation to this area in here. We're just going to paint this in. I'm holding down the mouse, painting it in. If you want to see where you affected it, you can hover over it like that. I actually like to show it as I am painting in. That way it gives me a better idea here. One thing to note here is that I have auto mask checked, which means Lightroom is going to automatically detect where edges are to help me stay within where I want to. And it does a pretty good job of it. That looks pretty good. I'm actually going to go back here and get rid of this. I don't like that. And sometimes you just have to go back and make some adjustments. The global contrast slider I don't find particularly useful, other than to get these back closer towards the middle. You can see how that squeezes it and makes it further out. Sometimes when I'm too far out, I just have to reduce the contrast a little so that I can increase it back in certain areas. Like that. So I think this image is looking pretty good now. It's at this point where I might want to zoom in here, and here's your zoom bar. You can zoom in a lot if you want, and this allows you to select the level at which you're zooming in. And a lot of times there's dust spots in the image, and I'm not seeing one here, but if we did have one, let's just pretend that that's a dust spot. We would use this spot removal tool, and we would just circle it and click it, and it will guess where to sample from. And you can change these, and I like to use close to 100% opacity. And the heel, the heel has a more gradual effect. The clone is a perfect copy of the sampling point, and so sometimes that's necessary, but the default for dust spot removal is heel. So I would just go through the image. It's nice to check everything before you're done, so you don't have to come back and change this later. One thing I'm noticing here is there's a little bit of noise. This might be hard to see, but there's a little bit of splotchiness in the sky, and that's due to camera noise and adjusting things the way we did. So let's say we want to crop things. So here's your crop tool. And you have the aspect ratio here, which you can select, or you can enter custom ones. I've entered some custom ones here because I like 16:9 and 2:1, and it's a really nice way to display photos. It's a 4:3 ratio, but I'm gonna leave it original, and if you leave it locked, it'll maintain that aspect ratio. If you want to unlock it, you can make whatever ratio you want. So let's leave it locked and crop in a little bit. Now, Lightroom has a way to show patterns here. The default is this. And this can be helpful to align things, and it can help you check your horizon level, which you can change the angle here like this, or reset it. But I kind of find these lines distracting. Thirds is a little better, but sometimes I just like to not show anything. Even though there's nothing on there, I still find it a little distracting to see the real crop. But Lightroom has a great function where you can press L and it will dim the surrounding area so you can see it. You press it one more time and it will completely black it out. So now you can see exactly what you're doing. All these things here are still functional, they're just dark. So you can press one more time and get back. You can accept the crop by pressing close or hitting return. So that's looking good. I think we could be putting this out on the web. So we're going to go down here. Before we do that, we're going to add some sharpening. So I like to lower this to 0.8 sometimes and add a good amount of sharpening. This mask function, if you hold Option or Alt if you're on a PC and drag this, you can see what it starts to block off certain parts of the image. The black parts are not being affected by the sharpening. The white parts are. So at 100% of mask, this adjustment's hardly doing anything. And you almost never want to sharpen everything because you really want to selectively sharpen the image. So I like to find something where I'm really seeing primarily the edges of the main features, so something like that. Now, Lightroom sharpening is okay. I will say that there are better third-party plugins that can do sharpening better, but if for starting off, this is not a bad way to do it. Noise reduction. So we saw some noise up here. It's not bad. Generally, if you shoot at high ISO or low light, and there's a lot of shadow, you can get a lot of noise. Like we might have some more noise in these dark areas here, but it's not bad. So if you increase noise reduction, it blurs the areas and you lose all your detail, your fine detail. So you got to be careful with not to add too much so that you lose all your detail. So in this case, I'm only going to add a little bit because I didn't have that much noise. And that's pretty much it. We started with correcting the lens profile and did our tonal value adjustments to get the histogram balanced. And then we added some contrast with the tone curve and clarity. We got into color management with the white balance, vibrance, saturation, and furthermore with the HSL. And then we fixed some local things with the gradient and the brush tool. We removed some distractions and dust spots with the clone spot removal tool. We cropped our image and we got it ready for the web with some sharpening and noise reduction. So this is the formula that we're using to edit the image. And now we're able to go here and export to a JPEG. We won't be affecting the original file. We will be using that data and the formula we created to create a new file. You can also access export. Right click to export. You can see all my user presets, but you won't have those at first. So we'll show you how to make them. So we're going to go here, and the export tool in Lightroom is excellent. It allows you to put your files in specific folder locations, to name them and resize them and do a variety of things so that you can have one button that just does the same thing all the time. And for web, this is excellent. So we're going to put this in our directory that we made in our photography photo output, this time web. I'm going to put it here. And we're going to choose that. Then we're going to have, if you want to rename your files, which I like to add, keep the original file name but append it with some custom text. This is how you do it. Check the box. There's actually no dash that it adds. It's directly after the file name, so you usually want a character here, either a space or an underscore, to separate this. You can add information here. 1200 pixels would be accomplished by image sizing, so we're going to resize to 1200 pixels. Check the resize to fit. Select long edge. Don't enlarge. This is helpful to just have on there so you don't accidentally make a file bigger than it is. Put 1200 pixels at 300. So the other thing is this S medium, which is my notation for sharpening. So we're going to sharpen check the sharpen box for screen, and standard is the medium value. Metadata, it's up to you what you want to leave in. I leave in all the metadata for now. The file settings here, you can select the type of file you are exporting. Sometimes you may want to export a TIFF file to maintain the highest quality after your edits. But for the web, JPEG is preferred. Quality is 100, color space is sRGB. If you're familiar with ICC profiles, this is where you would select that. And this is used for printing to make sure that your color turns out just right. If there are websites that you upload that have file size limits, this can be a helpful tool where you can limit a file size. I'll leave it unchecked for now. So that looks good here. So once you set all this up and you have your web preset, you can go over here and click Add Preset. Name it whatever you want. We can call it for web 1200 pixels. We'll put it in user presets and we'd hit create. So we're going to go ahead and execute these settings by clicking export. It looks like I already have a file in there with these settings. So I'm going to, and oftentimes it gives you this if you, let's say you exported something and you changed it and you want to export it again. Well, if you use the same file name, it'll ask you to overwrite or use unique names. It's a very handy tool to just overwrite the file with a new change that you added. So I'm going to go ahead and overwrite that. And we can go take a look at that. And there it is. All ready for the web. So that concludes a brief overview of Lightroom, and I'll show you, I'll compare this to the beginning. So I'm going to create a virtual copy. Now this is a perfect example of the non-destructive aspects of Lightroom. Is a virtual copy is accessing the same set of original image data, but it's just allowing you to make a new formula here. And I'm going to go ahead and hit reset, so it's going to take us back to the original image data. And you can see the before and after. And we did that pretty quickly. And you can see that Lightroom is a very powerful tool to get some basic color adjustments and adding contrast and balancing out your light levels. It's a very powerful tool. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and remember to subscribe to the mailing list to receive new updates on future tutorials. You can follow me on Facebook. Check for those links in the description, and thank you for watching.